Every relationship we step into becomes a part of our story, but not every character deserves to stay in the book. Sometimes we keep rereading the same painful chapter, hoping the ending will magically change, when deep down we know it never will. Walking away like he never existed isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let one person's role define your entire narrative. You get to decide how big of a part he plays in your life, and the truth is, he was just one chapter, not the whole book. Leaving without regret means reclaiming the pen, taking ownership of your story, and writing the kind of future that excites you more than any memory of him ever could. When you've been deeply involved with someone, it's easy to forget that your life is your story, not theirs. You start weaving them into every line, every chapter, until it feels like without them, the book wouldn't even make sense. But the truth is, your story was never theirs to write. You were alive, growing, dreaming, and creating long before they entered the picture. And you'll continue to do so long after they're gone. Walking away like he never existed doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means refusing to let him hold the pen that belongs in your hand. Too often, when a relationship ends, we keep giving that person authorship. We let their absence dictate how we feel, how we see ourselves, how we move forward. We build entire narratives around what they did, what they didn't do, how they hurt us, how they once loved us. Every page becomes about them, and in that, we forget the most important truth. They were only ever a supporting character. You are the protagonist. Your life is not their story, it's yours. And when you recognize that, regret loses its grip because you realize they never had the power to define your story unless you gave it to them. Imagine reading a novel where the main character spends every chapter obsessing over someone who walked out in the first third of the book. You'd get frustrated, right? You'd want to shake them and say, "You have so much life left to live. Why are you wasting so many pages on someone who isn't even here anymore?" That's exactly what happens when you let an ex dominate your story. You turn them into the centerpiece when in reality, they were only meant to be a passing plot point. The story is bigger than them, and so are you. Taking the pen back is about rewriting how you see the past. Instead of saying, "He broke me," you reframe it as, "I learned from him." Instead of, "I wasted years," you say, "I grew in ways I couldn't have without that experience." The words you choose become the story you live, and those words decide whether you carry regret or freedom. The difference isn't in what happened, it's in how you narrate it. You're not erasing him, but you're stripping him of the power to define what comes next. Sometimes we give someone too much credit in our story because we believe their presence validated us. We think he chose me, therefore I mattered, or worse, he left me, therefore I didn't. But your value was never tied to his acknowledgement. You mattered before him, you matter after him, and you'll matter long after his memory fades. When you walk away like he never existed in your story, what you're really doing is pulling your worth back from his hands and placing it back where it always belonged with you. The truth is, he doesn't deserve another chapter, not because he wasn't significant at the time, but because his role is complete. His part of the story is done, and every time you reopen the book to his section, you stall your own plot development. You stop exploring what's next. You stop meeting new characters. You stop discovering the depths of who you are. Regret thrives when you reread old pages, but it dies when you finally start writing new ones. So ask yourself, what happens in the next chapter if he's not in it? What do you create when you stop centering him and start centering you? That's the power of taking the pen back. That's how you transform the story from one of loss into one of reinvention, because the story of your life isn't about who walked away, it's about who you became after they did. And when you see it that way, walking away isn't regretful at all. It's the ultimate act of authorship. What keeps people stuck after a breakup? isn't always the reality of what they lost, it's the fantasy they're still holding onto. You don't just miss the person, you miss the version of him you created in your head. You miss the potential, the dream, the what if of who he could have been if only he had tried harder, loved deeper, or shown up more consistently. And that's where regret creeps in. You don't regret leaving him, you regret leaving behind the fantasy. But here's the harsh truth: the fantasy was never real. The reality is what you actually lived with day after day, and if the reality was enough, you wouldn't have felt the need to walk away in the first place. Detaching from the fantasy is the key to leaving without regret. It means looking at the relationship without the rose-colored glasses, without the highlight reel your brain loves to play. It means remembering not just the sweet words he said, but the countless times he didn't follow through. It means admitting that while there were moments of connection, the pattern was inconsistency, neglect, or emotional distance. When you allow yourself to see the truth without sugarcoating it, you realize that you weren't giving up on something magical. You were finally freeing yourself from something that was slowly draining you. It's natural to want to cling to the dream. After all, it's what kept you invested for so long. Every time he showed you a glimpse of who he could be, it gave you hope that maybe the fairy tale was still possible. But potential is not the same as reality. Hope is not the same as consistency. You can't build a life on flashes of who someone might become. You can only build on who they are showing up as every single day. And if who he was didn't make you feel loved, secure, and valued, then that fantasy was nothing more than smoke. The danger of the fantasy is that it makes you feel like you've lost something rare. You think, what if I never find someone like him again? But the truth is, you won't, because what you're really afraid of losing isn't him, it's the illusion. And illusions can't sustain you, they can only keep you stuck. Once you recognize that, regret fades because you stop longing for something that never truly existed. You can honor the good memories without confusing them for a reality that wasn't sustainable. Detaching from the fantasy also means forgiving yourself for believing in it. You may look back and feel embarrassed for holding on so long, or angry at yourself for ignoring the red flags. But compassion is crucial here. You believed in the fantasy because you wanted love, because you saw the best in someone, because you hoped for more. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The strength comes in recognizing when hope is no longer serving you and choosing reality instead. That's the moment you walk away without regret. One powerful practice is to remind yourself daily of the reality. Write it down if you have to, how you felt, what you endured, what patterns you couldn't ignore anymore. Whenever the fantasy tries to pull you back, revisit that truth, because your feelings didn't lie, your exhaustion didn't lie. The loneliness you felt while being with him didn't lie. That was the reality, and reality is what you're building your future on, not illusions. When you let go of the fantasy, you give yourself back to yourself. You stop waiting for someone to become who you needed them to be and start becoming that person for yourself. You stop living in the dream of what could have been and start living in the power of what can be now. And that shift is where regret disappears, because you realize you didn't lose your story when you let him go. You just lost the fantasy, and what you gained instead was the truth. One of the most powerful ways to walk away without regret is to reclaim the meaning you give to the relationship. Most people stay stuck because they assign the wrong meaning to what happened. They say, it ended because I wasn't enough. Or if I had done something differently, maybe it could have worked. That interpretation ties your worth to someone else's choices, and that's where regret festers. But when you choose to see the relationship as a lesson, a stepping stone, an experience that shaped you, then it becomes a chapter of growth instead of a mark of failure. The meaning you give it will decide whether you feel broken or empowered when you close that chapter. Think about it. Two people can go through the exact same heartbreak, but one walks away devastated convinced they'll never recover, while the other emerges stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The difference isn't in what happened, but in the story they tell themselves about it. If you see it as proof that love never works out for you, you'll stay stuck in bitterness. But if you see it as the moment you learned what you truly deserve, or as the time you built the courage to let go of someone who wasn't right for you, then you transform pain into progress. Regret loses its power because the story you're telling yourself about the ending is no longer disempowering, it's liberating. The truth is, relationships are not just about permanence, they're about evolution. Some people come into your life to show you what love isn't, so you can better recognize what love is. Some come to highlight the parts of yourself that still need healing. Some come to remind you of your standards, your boundaries, your values. When you shift the meaning from "I lost him" to "I learned from him," you no longer feel like something was taken from you. You feel like something was given to you, even if it didn't look the way you wanted at the time. This perspective doesn't erase the hurt, but it changes the weight of it. Instead of looking back with anger or longing, you start to look back with clarity. You realize that even in the moments that hurt you, you were being shaped into a stronger version of yourself. You see that every tear, every frustration, every disappointment was building the resilience you needed to create a better future. And with that understanding, regret has no place, because nothing was wasted. Every moment had meaning, and that meaning is now part of your strength. Reclaiming the meaning also gives you back control. When you believe he was the one who defined the story, when you make him the reason you feel broken, you hand over your narrative. But when you decide the meaning for yourself, you're the one writing the ending. You get to say, "This wasn't a tragedy, it was a turning point." And that simple shift takes the weight of regret off your shoulders, because regret only survives when we feel powerless. It's also important to understand that meaning is not found, it's created. You get to decide what this relationship represents in your life. Maybe it was the relationship that taught you patience. Maybe it showed you the danger of ignoring red flags. Maybe it was the reminder that you need to trust your intuition more. Whatever it was, that meaning becomes the gift you carry forward. And when you can extract that gift, you walk away not empty-handed, but richer than before. So the next time your mind tries to take you down the road of what-ifs or if-onlys, stop and ask yourself, what meaning do I want to give this? Do I want to make it a story about regret and loss? Or do I want to make it a story about growth and courage? That choice is always yours. And the moment you choose a meaning that empowers you, you walk away like he never existed in your story, because what really exists now is you, stronger, wiser, and ready for the chapter ahead. Walking away without regret requires more than just closing a door. It requires creating something new that draws you forward. The reason so many people look back is because they leave an empty space behind. They step out of a relationship, but they don't step into anything meaningful to replace it. And in that void, memories creep back in. Loneliness convinces them that maybe the past was better than it really was. Regret grows because there's nothing to counterbalance it. The key is to fill your life so fully, so intentionally, that looking back feels unnecessary. You're too busy creating a future that excites you to romanticize a past that drained you. Think about when you were a child. You didn't dwell on toys you outgrew because there was always something new to play with, something new to learn. The excitement of discovery kept you moving forward. As adults, we lose that sense of exploration and adventure, especially after heartbreak. We sit in the silence, replaying old conversations instead of creating new experiences. And that's where regret festers, not in the breakup itself, but in the lack of a compelling "what's next?" When you fill your life with growth, passion, and new connections, you stop asking, "Why did I lose him?" and start asking, "What else is possible for me now?" One of the most powerful things you can do is channel your energy into self-expansion. That might mean focusing on your career, developing a skill you've always wanted to learn, or traveling to places you've only dreamed of visiting. It might mean surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who reflect back your worth, who remind you that life is abundant with opportunities for love and connection. When you redirect the energy you once poured into him back into yourself, you create momentum. And momentum makes it hard to look back because forward movement feels too good to trade for the stagnation of old memories. There's also something deeply healing about proving to yourself that your life works beautifully without him. Every new success, every joyful moment, every laugh you share with a friend becomes evidence that you didn't need him to feel whole. Slowly, your brain rewires itself. Instead of associating happiness with him, you begin to associate it with your own independence, your own growth, your own power. And the more evidence you collect, the less room there is for regret, because regret relies on the illusion that life was better with him. You replace that illusion with a reality that is even better without him. Of course, creating a fulfilling future doesn't mean you won't feel the pangs of nostalgia. You will. Memories don't vanish overnight, but when they surface, you'll have something to compare them to, something alive and present that feels more exciting than something dead and gone. You'll find yourself thinking, "Yes, we had moments, but look at what I have now. Look at who I'm becoming. Look at where I'm going." That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you actively decide to invest in your future instead of sitting in your past. Filling your life also forces you to raise your standards. The more you discover about yourself, the more you demand from the people who enter your life. You stop settling for breadcrumbs because you've seen what it feels like to feed yourself fully. You stop clinging to what you lost because you're too focused on what you're gaining. And when someone new eventually enters your world, they won't be able to get away with offering less than what you know you deserve. The past relationship stops being a source of regret and becomes a benchmark, reminder of how far you've come and what you'll never go back to. In the end, walking away without regret isn't just about leaving him behind. It's about walking into something bigger, brighter, and better than what you had. Regret only thrives in an empty life, but when your life is rich, when your days are filled with purpose, joy, and growth, regret simply doesn't belong. You won't want to look back because the view ahead is too compelling. One of the hardest parts of walking away is the lingering voice in your head that says, "Maybe he'll realize what he lost. Maybe one day he'll come back." That thought keeps you tied to the past because it places your healing in someone else's hands. It suggests that your closure will come not when you decide, but when he validates your worth by regretting letting you go. But here's the truth. Waiting for his regret is just another way of giving him power. Real freedom comes when you no longer need him to feel remorse, when you no longer care whether he ever recognizes what he lost. Closure isn't something he gives you, it's something you create for yourself. Many people believe regret is a form of justice. They think if he suffers, then I'll finally feel okay, but that mindset keeps you trapped because it ties your peace to his pain. What if he never feels regret? What if he moves on quickly? Does that mean you're unworthy, unloved, or insignificant? Of course not, but if you've made his regret the metric for your healing, then you'll always be vulnerable to disappointment. The real power is in deciding that your life, your growth, and your happiness are evidence enough of your worth. His awareness or lack of it has nothing to do with your value. Letting go of the need for his regret also protects you from the dangerous cycle of revenge. When you secretly hope he'll suffer, you're still emotionally tied to him. You're still centering him in your story, making him the reference point for how you measure your healing. But when you release that need, you cut the cord completely. You're no longer waiting for karma to play out or for him to wake up one day full of remorse. You've already moved on, and whether or not he ever does becomes irrelevant. That's where true freedom lies, when he no longer has the power to affect your emotional state at all. It's also worth remembering that regret often doesn't look the way we imagine it. Maybe he does feel it, but never shows it. Maybe he feels it years later when you've long stopped caring. Maybe he doesn't feel it at all, but none of those scenarios change the fact that your life moves forward. Your healing is not contingent on his emotional journey. By letting go of the need for his regret, you stop putting your happiness on hold. You stop saying, "I'll feel better when," and instead say, "I feel better now because I chose myself." The beauty of this shift is that it redirects all your energy inward. Instead of scanning his life for signs of regret, you invest that energy in building a life so fulfilling that you don't have time to care what he feels. You focus on becoming the version of yourself you always wanted to be, and as you do, you begin to realize something powerful. The best revenge is not his regret, it's your indifference. The moment you no longer care whether he sees your value is the moment you step into your fullest power. Walking away without regret means no longer writing your story around him at all. It means recognizing that his remorse, or lack of it, is irrelevant to your growth. Because at the end of the day, the true measure of your healing isn't whether he regrets losing you. It's whether you no longer regret giving yourself back to you. And that's a decision you make today, not one you wait for him to confirm tomorrow. When you reach that point, you've not only walked away, you've risen above. The final step to walking away like he never existed and leaving without regret is to fully reclaim your identity outside of the relationship. When you've been deeply attached to someone, it's easy to blur the lines between who you are and who you were with him. You start to define yourself in relation to him, his partner, his supporter, his priority, and when it ends, it feels like part of you disappears. That's where so much regret comes from, the illusion that you lost yourself when you lost him. But the truth is, you didn't lose yourself. You just forgot parts of you while you were with him. Walking away without regret means rediscovering those parts and letting them come alive again. Relationships have a way of shrinking us if we're not careful. Sometimes we compromise too much, quiet our passions, or suppress our true opinions in order to keep the peace. Sometimes we become so invested in someone else's world that we stop building our own, and when it ends, it can feel like there's nothing left of us outside of them. But this is actually your greatest opportunity to rebuild, to reconnect with the pieces of yourself that went dormant, to expand into the person you were always meant to be. This isn't about erasing the past. It's about remembering who you are without the influence of someone who couldn't meet you where you deserved to be. Reclaiming your identity means asking yourself, who was I before him? What brought me joy, excitement, and fulfillment? And just as importantly, who do I want to be now? This is not about going back to an old version of yourself. It's about creating a new one. The version of you that has been through heartbreak, learned hard lessons, and discovered resilience. That version is wiser, stronger, and far more aware of her worth. And when you embrace her fully, you no longer see the relationship as a loss, you see it as part of the journey that led you back to yourself. One of the most empowering shifts happens when you realize you are not defined by what someone else failed to see in you. If he didn't value you, that says nothing about your value. If he didn't choose you, that says nothing about your desirability. Too often, people internalize rejection as a reflection of their worth, when in reality, it simply reflects the limitations of the other person. Reclaiming your identity means no longer using his perspective as a mirror. Instead, you begin to see yourself through your own eyes, through the eyes of the people who truly love and support you, through the life you are building independently of him. The beautiful thing about this step is that it doesn't just heal you from the past, it protects you for the future. When you know who you are, when you live in alignment with your values and passions, you stop settling for relationships that require you to shrink. You stop molding yourself to fit into someone else's story and instead invite people into the life you've created. And that's how you ensure you never feel this kind of regret again, because regret thrives when we abandon ourselves. When we stay true to who we are, there's nothing to regret, no matter how a relationship ends. Walking away like he never existed isn't about denial. It's about liberation. It's about recognizing that your life, your happiness, your identity are too important to tether to someone who couldn't hold them with care. When you reclaim all the pieces of yourself you left behind, when you step fully into the person you were always meant to be, you don't just leave him in the past, you leave regret there too. And you step into a future where you are whole, complete, and entirely your own. Walking away like he never existed isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about refusing to let the past hold you hostage. It's about realizing that every moment you spent with him served its purpose. It taught you something, it revealed something, it shaped you. But the story doesn't end there. The real story begins when you decide that your life is too valuable to keep rereading old chapters. You've taken back the pen. You've detached from the fantasy. You've given new meaning to the relationship. You've filled your life with new possibilities. You've released the need for his regret. And most importantly, you've reclaimed yourself. That's the path to leaving without regret, not by erasing what happened, but by elevating who you've become because of it. There's no power in looking back for validation, no strength in waiting for someone else to recognize your worth. The power has always been in you, in your decision to honor your own value, to write your own story, to move forward with clarity and dignity. So when you walk away, don't walk with bitterness, don't walk with anger. Walk with the quiet confidence of someone who knows her story is still being written, and it's more beautiful than anything left behind. Walk away not because he didn't matter, but because you matter more. Walk away like he never existed, because the truth is, in the story of your becoming, he was never the destination. He was just a detour, and now it's your time to step fully into the life you were always meant to live, with no regret, no looking back, only forward.